So this question is on the camping ban. The Department of Justice recently submitted a legal brief in Boise, Idaho case that stated that camping bans, like Boulder's, as well as other anti-vagrancy and quality of life laws which criminalize activities such as sleeping that are a necessary part of being human, are a violation of the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause. City Attorney Tom Carr recently stated that Boulder should not be concerned with the DOJ's position because it will take years for the issue to reach the U.S. Supreme Court, and any action taken with respect to Boise's ordinance will have no effect on Boulder until the Supreme Court issues a decision. In addition, he recently stated that his office loses approximately half of the camping cases that they take to trial, although his office persists in enforcing the no camping ordinance. What is your opinion of the city's camping ban? And if you're not happy with it, what steps would you propose to deal with the issue?
So the Department of Justice is absolutely right that it's inhumane, it violates human rights, it violates basic dignity. The city attorney is absolutely wrong when he says we can sit on our hands and wait for people to suffer and wait for the Supreme Court to notice. I've worked with the DOJ in disability rights, and I'll tell you, by the time they know there's a problem, there's a big problem. And we've had people freeze to death, so we've got a big problem, and there's no time to wait. We need to immediately overhaul the camping ban. We need to set up homeless bill of rights. We need to have some place for people to go. And we need to understand that the police are not going to be people's first choice when they're vulnerable, when they're poor, when they're homeless, when they're hungry. So punishment, punitiveness, is not going to be people's first choice, and we need to look at that.
So I'm completely against the camping ban. I think that Keith was right on with all the reasons to be against it. In addition, I think that Boulder needs to go beyond just repealing the camping ban and actually passing the right to rest to give people without housing the basic rights that they need to live, to be able to eat and sleep in public.
So I have to stand on this. I live in the 500 block of Arapahoe, and many of the homeless are my neighbors. My husband and I debate this, but I call them my neighbors. Having said this, on the south side of the creek between 6th and 9th Street Bridge, on many occasions, there are extreme hobo camps. These hobo camps are not appropriate. They take open space that we paid for, and they turn it into trash dumps. It is awful to see our police, which currently are the people dealing with the problem, probably 60,000 a year employees out cleaning up after people who are basically addicted and alcoholic and cannot get into homeless shelters. There has to be a different solution than this, and it is certainly not to turn the central area of Boulder into a hobo camp. I was one of the first to start sending photos to council of pictures of what that Central Park area looked like, which was denuded, filled with cigarette butts and trash. That is not the way to save Boulder. I agree with Cha-Cha, and I agree with Keith.
I oppose the camping ban. As I understand it, currently people can sleep outside, but if they have any kind of sleeping bag or blanket, they can be prosecuted at that point. That's a health and safety issue. There should be no doubt about that part of it. I think I could support limitations on camping, but only if we had enough shelters and even open spaces where we're designated that are accessible to people to be able to sleep outside as well. That would be the only case I would support it. And I don't want to see people suffering unduly because other people want to ignore the problem of homelessness. I'd like to look at all of our anti-vagrancy related ordinances and make sure they're not discriminating, and propose that we have no enforcement without a solution. And I'm also a proponent of making the city attorney's position an elected position.
I think it is cruel to expect people on a really cold winter night not even to have a blanket or a comforter to shelter themselves. So I do not approve of this at all. We should provide housing or at least shelter for people on the coldest nights of the year. I was one of the founding board members of BOHO, which does exactly that it opens up places of worship, like perhaps this church participates in it as well, that opens up places of worship for homeless people on the coldest nights so that they will not freeze out on the streets and will not be persecuted for that either. And these people are accepted regardless of whether they are drunk or on drugs or whatever, because it doesn't matter how your condition is, you're going to freeze and die if you're going to be exposed to the elements. So I do not support this kind of punitive action against homeless people, but nevertheless, we should not use Central Boulder as a place where they go because they have no other recourse.
Hi, Jan Burton. I do not support punitive action on homeless people. I think they are in a situation they don't want to be in, and I don't think that's a compassionate way to do it, and Boulder is better than that. We should make it a high priority to find or create housing, some sort of housing or shelter for the homeless, and especially the ones that are from here. I've been told that the police know the names of 300 homeless here who are from here, and we should be trying to help solve their problems, and it should be a very high priority.
Aaron Brockett, not to repeat what I agree with people that have already said, but I think it's certainly cruel and unusual to essentially criminalize being human. So I think it's, that's a law that has to change in town. To me, the answer to these questions is providing services. It's not about enforcing inhumane laws. So I think it's critical that we get the homeless organizations in town, the Bridge House, the shelter, and Boho, to work together and coordinate their services such that we make sure that there's always a safe, dry place for folks when things are cold outside. So I think if we always have that place, then we could work with a task force or a citizens action group like has been discussed, to make sure that people have a safe place to go and that we get folks who need the services into the services rather than attempting to ticket them.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a couple things about, we don't have to wait for the Supreme Court to act. We need to be looking at our own moral compass as to what we do. And I don't think it's right to criminalize the acts that are occurring there. And I know we probably all feel the same about finding shelter in the winter, but many of these people are going to be outside in the summer as well. And we need to look at setting aside areas somewhere that they can find a home.
Again, my name is Bob Yates. I actually got to know several of the unhoused people in the community. My office is actually right across the street from this building, and so I come over here to Bridge House from time to time at lunch hour and get to know some of the folks that are here long-term, some of the folks that are passing through, and each one of them has a human story. I think on a scale of 1 to 10, we've made a little progress in the last year or two with the 3 organizations that Aaron mentioned coming together, but I think that maybe we were at a 2 when we moved to about a 3 or 4. We have a long, long ways to go, both for housing people and structures. And for those who like to camp, I used to be chairman of the Parks Board. We have 91 parks in this town, 91 parks. Perhaps we could take 1 or 2 of them and set them aside as a campground for those who want to camp.
Michael Krutek. So I'm not supportive of the camping ban. I actually think that the enforcement is counterproductive. My understanding of what happens is that the homeless get arrested, they get their goods taken, their sleeping bags and all of their products taken from them, and then they are released because they can't be held because they're not going to be prosecuted. And so what we end up with is somebody who's now out on the street without the things that they had previously to go ahead and protect themselves. They also have, if they've been found guilty, then they end up with a misdemeanor because they can't pay the ticket. And so then if they are actually not addicted or not to substances, then they can't get jobs because they've got a misdemeanor against them. So I think that the whole cycle is a very counterproductive cycle that we're working with, and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, firstly, we definitely need to get rid of the camping ban. This is an ordinance that punishes people who have already been punished enough. Setting up a campsite is great, but we should set up more than just one campsite and allow for, people to hang in the public parks that we pay for in the first place. With that aside, we do need to put more money into our social services for the homeless and just for people that are less fortunate than a lot of people in Boulder. And we need to do this by looking at other things like psychological things, not just the transition from being homeless to not being homeless is not an easy path, and some people have a harder struggle than others. And with addiction in mind and with all these other things, you know, we need to be helping people, not like hurting people. We need to be setting an example for the rest of the United States, not waiting for the problem to reach here, like Comrade Keith and a few others have pointed out. You know, waiting for the problem to reach here is going to create a bigger problem in the end.